Hi everyone, my name is Aaron, although they do call me AA Run in the streets, and welcome back to my channel. Today I want to talk about Debbie Cook. Debbie Cook is a woman who was very famous in Scientology, and on December 31st, 2011, Debbie delivered an almighty righteous pimp slap right to the face of David Miscavige. What Debbie Cook did almost 10 years ago led to what I'm going to guess is probably the biggest exodus of people out of Scientology since some of the things that happened in the early 80s. Let me try to explain how famous Debbie Cook was in Scientology. If Scientology was the entirety of the NFL, and if the organization that Debbie was in charge of, the biggest, most important, most profitable organization in all of Scientology. So I don't know if that would be the Cowboys or the Patriots, but we're going to go with the Patriots. So you have in the Patriots, you've got like the leader of the team. We'll pretend like it's still Tom Brady. Tampa Bay! So you've got Tom Brady, the world famous, world renowned GOAT, leader of the team. And yet you still also have a very famous coach in Bill Belichick. You also have a world famous high profile owner in Robert Kraft. So in this analogy, I'm not sure which one David Miscavige would be. Is he Bill Belichick or is he Robert Kraft? We'll make David Miscavige Bill Belichick because Bill Belichick's an angry little fella. So you got Debbie, star quarterback, super famous. You got David Miscavige, the high profile coach, who everyone thinks is really the brains behind the expansion of Scientology, but secretly is super jealous of Debbie because she's actually an accomplished leader, whereas Miscavige is not. So the importance and the impact of what Debbie did would be if Tom Brady left the Patriots and then 4 or 5 years later wrote a tell-all book that was hand-delivered to every Patriots season ticket holder and every member of the press that said, hey, by the way, Belichick secretly recorded every NFL practice of every team for the last 10 years I was with the team and personally injected steroids directly into the butt of everyone in the locker room before every single game, and nobody should support him, and the league would be better off if Belichick weren't in it. Calm down, Patriots fans. I'm not throwing shade at Bill Belichick. This is for the analogy. I'm trying to give a really, really good example of just how important a figure Debbie Cook was within Scientology, how well known she was, how well respected she was, just how serious the allegations she was making against Miscavige were, and also exactly what it was that she was asking all Scientologists to do. She directly outed David Miscavige and what Scientologists would perceive to be crimes directly to every single Scientologist in the world, if not damn close to it. I'm going to split this video into a bunch of chapters, as I have been doing recently. For those of you who kind of find the internal details of the Scientology world interesting, I'm going to give a detailed explanation here of why Debbie was so important in Scientology. For those of you not quite interested, just jump ahead to the next chapter. So Debbie was very well known and very important in Scientology for a few different reasons. One reason is that she had personally known and worked with L. Ron Hubbard since she was a teenager. She is someone who worldwide in Scientology was considered one of the top experts on what L. Ron Hubbard would consider to be standard tech. Standard is a real buzzword in Scientology. You've got standard tech, you've got standard admin, standard ethics, standard org form. Everything needs to be standard. Standard is basically, you could say, exactly as L. Ron Hubbard would have wanted. So Debbie was considered basically one of the world's top experts on that subject. The position that Debbie held in the Sea Org, that is how she actually became to be so famous and well known, was she was the captain of the Flag Service Organization. Now, I live here in Clearwater, Florida. In Clearwater, Florida, you have the largest church of Scientology in the world that delivers Scientology to paying public, and it's called Flag. And this entire base down here is called the Flagland Base. And on the Flagland Base, there's kind of a bunch of different technically independent, different Scientology organizations. But the biggest one and the most important one here on the Flag Land Base is called the Flag Service Organization. It's the one organization that makes more money from Scientology than any other organization in the entire world. In Scientology Sea Organization, captain most often refers to a post, not a rank, and that was true in Debbie's case. So her post was captain of the Flag Service Organization, which means she ran the entire thing. I want to explain a little further why the role of the Flag Service Organization is so important in Scientology, so you get a better idea of just how elevated of a status Debbie Cook had amongst all the Scientologists in the world. So the lowest level Scientology organization in the world is called a mission. The characteristics of a mission are they're usually very small, they usually aren't even open full time, They are actually privately owned by public Scientologists. They are not directly owned by the Mother Church or Church of Scientology International. They are not allowed to train any Scientology auditors, but they can deliver all of the auditing that exists on the lower, non-confidential half of Scientology's bridge. Anyone can join Scientology at a mission. There actually aren't even that many of them in the world. If there was more than 100 or 200 of these tiny little privately owned Scientology organizations in the world, I'd be shocked. Right above missions, you have what's called a Class 5 organization. These are all owned and operated by the Church of Scientology International. I mean, on paper, they might be a locally owned LLC, but officially within Scientology, they are not privately owned. They are fully under the control and ownership of the Church of Scientology International. These organizations tend to have bigger buildings. They are all open 7 days a week from morning until night. They can deliver all of the same auditing that a mission can deliver, except the Class 5 organization can also train professional auditors up to the level of a Class 5 auditor. This is the most common type of Scientology organization that you're going to run into. But even here, you only have about 100 of these located in the United States and maybe another 100 everywhere else around the world. Yet, like I said, they are bigger, they're open more hours, they're in better locations, so you're more likely to run into a Class 5 org than you are to run into a mission. But these organizations collectively, the missions and the orgs, these are what are considered in Scientology the lower level organizations. These are where you join Scientology. Above Class 5 organizations, you run into the types of Scientology org that are staffed by Sea Org members. The Sea Org members are the guys who sign the billion-year contracts, run around in uniforms. It used to be more like specifically Navy uniforms. These days, everyone looks like a bellhop or a valet. And these are the guys who do nothing but work for Scientology 100 hours a week. They don't have jobs outside of Scientology. They don't own property outside of Scientology. They are what Scientology likes to refer to as its clergy. So there's only one Class 6 organization in the entire world. That's one of the buildings located on L. Ron Hubbard Way in Hollywood, California. Back in the 70s, L. Ron Hubbard created this standalone organization, and ever since then, nobody's had the balls to admit that it didn't make any sense. So that organization still exists. A Class 6 organization delivers all of the same auditing that a Class 5 org delivers, but it can also train a Class 6 auditor. A Class 6 auditor is still only able to deliver the lower non-confidential part of Scientology's bridge. So a Class 6 org really just competes directly with and cannibalizes the public of a Class 5 org, which is why they usually don't exist. Above a Class 6 organization, you have your most common type of Sea Org delivery organization, and that's a Class 9 organization. These guys specialize in delivering the confidential upper part of the bridge up to OT5. They can also train Class 9 auditors. A Class 9 auditor is the type of auditor that can deliver OT5. Above all of these, you have a Class 12 organization. The flag land base here in Clearwater, Florida, and the cruise ship that Scientology operates called the Freewinds are the only two Class 12 organizations in the world. The unique role that these two orgs play within the world of Scientology is that Flag is the only org in the world that can deliver OT6 and 7, and the ship is the only org in the world that can deliver OT8. So Flag delivers OT7 but not 8, and the ship delivers OT8 but not 7. And OT7 is the biggest, longest, most important auditing level in Scientology. It can take years and years and years to complete, whereas OT8 only takes a couple weeks. So explaining the whole landscape in this way, you can understand how within Scientology, Flag for a very long time was referred to as the Mecca. But anyway, after 9/11, they stopped referring to it as the Mecca. And anyway, you can see why the Flag Land Base is a massively important organization within the world of Scientology, and Debbie Cook ran that organization for 19 years. She worked at that organization for almost 30 years, but the last 19 of those years, she was the head of this thing. Debbie was featured in hundreds and hundreds of magazines and promos and posters and videos that were shown at every org in the world. Flag is the place all Scientologists kind of aspire to go to, and Debbie was the face of the organization. So sometime around 2004, 2005, Miscavige sort of got the notion that maybe Debbie was becoming a little bit too important, a little bit too high profile. So he decided to torpedo her career by doing to her what he does to everybody else, which was act like he's doing her a favor by promoting her. So he replaces Debbie as the head of the Flag Service Organization, or the FSO, and he promotes her up to international management to be his new right-hand woman. And Debbie's experience working under Miscavige for the next 2 years was so difficult, to put it mildly, that Debbie went from having devoted her entire life to doing what she was doing to actually saying, I'm done with this, I'm out of here. She didn't even say, I'm gonna go back to Clearwater and do my old job. She's like, I'm leaving this joint and she left the Sea organization. And that whole process of how she did that and what she experienced and what she was subjected to and all of that is a whole story unto itself. And if I tried to include that in this video would be way too long. But just Google Debbie Cook Scientology and you're gonna find everything you ever wanted to know. So Debbie leaves the Sea Org, I believe around October 2007. She basically kind of agrees to sort of keep her mouth shut and be a good girl and not rock the boat. And she moved to Texas and she opened up her own business. Public Scientologists and Scientologists around the world were still allowed to associate with her. She wasn't declared a suppressive person. She wasn't persona non grata. You didn't get in trouble for having her as a friend on Facebook or anything like that. Somewhere during this time, she accumulated a massive email list of what was probably pretty close to all Scientologists in the world. And on December 31st, 2011, she sent an email out putting David Miscavige on blast. From her position as someone who was known as like an ultimate authority on how L. Ron Hubbard expected things to be done, she laid out a laundry list of, what Scientologists would consider to be crimes that David Miscavige had committed to alter the emphasis of the entire church, from being an organization that was focused on, a Scientologist would say, helping people and saving people by selling and delivering Scientology to them, to transforming the organization into nothing but a money-hungry, predatory organization that was no longer accomplishing the aims of Scientology. Now, when Debbie sent out this email, she was, as you've probably gathered by the description I've given so far, she was still a 100% true believer in everything L. Ron Hubbard, in everything Scientology. She still believed in it all and supported it all. So after Debbie sent out this email, the church retaliated against her and actually sued her. And Debbie's actually the only person the Church of Scientology has sued in decades. They were claiming that her email violated some non-disclosure or maybe even some non-disparagement clauses that she may have signed on her way out of the Sea organization. But then Debbie countersued. And in this whole process, Debbie ended up testifying for like 2 or 3 days on the stand in a Texas court and delivered some of the most devastating testimony we have ever heard about what life under David Miscavige working at Scientology's international base was like. And after just a few days of this, Miscavige totally threw in the towel and instructed his attorneys to do a settlement with Debbie. I'm guessing she got a few $1 million to just go away. She had to move out of the country for a little bit. She had to promise not to talk about Scientology publicly or anything like that. She had to agree to some things, but this is not a criticism, by the way. That was probably the best case scenario for how Debbie's lawsuit with the church could have gone. You don't want to get into a long, protracted legal battle with the church. Actually, I'll tell you what, Dave, if you're watching, I will take this entire YouTube channel down for, this is a buy now offer. This is only good until the end of the month. I'd probably do it for 10 million. And actually, Dave, if you're really serious, you want to close this quickly. Today's Thursday at 1 o'clock. Dave, if you want to get this done by next Thursday at 2, I'll do it for 5 million. Your move. All right, so back to the email. So I can't read the whole email, even though it would probably be a pretty interesting, just maybe a standalone video. It's almost 3,000 words long, but I can do a pretty good job summarizing it because she kind of broke the email down into categories. And I thought this would be an interesting subject to cover because I'll tell you what, when I was growing up in Scientology, there had been some earlier times when there were similar upheavals, like mass exoduses of people leaving Scientology due to things that were quite embarrassing to Scientology. And I had remained completely ignorant and oblivious and uninformed about these things during my entire time growing up in Scientology. Because of the bubble that is Scientology, there's not really an opportunity, much less an emphasis, on informing members of things that have happened in its past that would get current members to possibly look on things presently in a different light. And it occurred to me that, even though time's going by so fast now as I'm getting older, that this email was already 10 years ago. There might be a whole subsection, like a mini generation of Scientologists who right now might be pretty involved in the world of Scientology, but 10 years ago were perhaps too young to really be paying attention. This is also the generation that's probably most likely to stumble upon something like this on YouTube. So I thought it might be helpful to cover these things and just, have it out there on the internet. Maybe some of these younger Scientologists will stumble on this and it'll get them to, think about something they hadn't thought about before. So the things Debbie pointed out, L. Ron Hubbard not only would not have done it this way, but specifically said it must never be done this way. This is why this email led to a mass exodus, because as much respect as Miscavige has from Scientologists, his respect only comes sort of by proxy via L. Ron Hubbard. He is viewed as whatever he's viewed as because he presents himself as being someone who's doing exactly what Hubbard would have wanted. And yet here you have Debbie, who is a literal expert on what Hubbard would have wanted, and she's calling him out on these things. So here we go. She mentions over-regging. Regging is a Scientology word for fundraising, selling something, asking for money. Reg is short for registrar, and reg is both used as a noun and a verb. You could say, I'm a reg, or you could say, I'm doing a reg interview. I was regging him for $10,000. So anyway, she says over-regging. The constant demands for all sorts of money for a variety of different projects. Scientology is known worldwide as being a very money-hungry organization. That has always been true. In the era of Hubbard, however, the emphasis was on making money through selling Scientology courses and auditing. In the era of Miscavige, Scientology makes more money through other fundraising activities than it does actually selling Scientology courses and auditing. Scientology asks members to donate for buildings. They ask members to donate for dissemination campaigns. They ask members to donate just to increase their status in a membership organization called the IAS, the International Association of Scientologists. In the era of Hubbard, the highest status you could achieve in the IAS was a lifetime membership, which cost like $200. Under Miscavige, memberships in the IAS, well, he introduced like dozens of membership statuses above lifetime so that people could donate extra. So you now have IAS statuses that you earn by donating 10 million, 25 million, 50 million, 75 million. And under the era of Hubbard, that was unheard of. She mentions here the massive fundraising to buy new buildings for existing Scientology organizations. Within the world of Scientology, this is called the Ideal Org program. Hubbard had written a policy called the Ideal Organization. And in the policy, he described how he expected a perfect Church of Scientology to look and operate and how it should feel. That policy mentioned absolutely nothing about having a big, giant, beautiful building. And that's what she brings up in this email. Under the era of Hubbard, whenever a church was in desperate need for money, it was supposed to just focus on selling more Scientology courses and auditing. It was strictly prohibited to ask people to donate to something just to raise money. Orgs were limited to selling Scientology services. Miscavige, in addition to what I just mentioned about creating all of these IAS statuses where people just donate money in exchange for nothing, he's also created this Ideal Org program where all Scientologists in a particular area are supposed to pitch in to help the org buy new giant building. And what has happened over the last 15 or 20 years is some of the orgs have purchased and renovated buildings that they could never have afforded to have purchased just by themselves, by their own operational income. And they end up with buildings that are so big, 10, 15, 20 times bigger than they need, that a lot of these orgs can't even afford to run the air conditioning in the summer or to run the heat in the winter, because the utility bills on these buildings are more sometimes than the organization even makes in a week. Miscavige does this because it's a great money-making opportunity for Scientology. But if you're a true believer in L. Ron Hubbard brand of Scientology, it doesn't accomplish the aims of Scientology. She mentions something that's really more of a technical issue. A lot of people who kind of watch Scientology out of a sort of a curiosity might be familiar with Scientology's state of clear. Miscavige ran an entire program 15 or so years ago. The years are just flying by these days, where he basically rounded up everybody who had attested to Scientology's state of clear and told them they weren't really clear so that they could then be sold more auditing to go clear again, or I guess in Miscavige's point of view, go clear for real for the first time. And this affected thousands and thousands of Scientologists. She mentions this thing that is a relatively new phenomenon in the era, under the era of Miscavige, of constantly making Scientologists redo steps that are lower level steps on the bridge. Miscavige sort of acts like before he came along, Nobody had ever done anything correctly in Scientology ever. Even people who had done those things under L. Ron Hubbard. Miscavige says auditors were never trained correctly before. No one ever properly attained the lower grades before. Nobody properly attained the upper OT levels before. And again, in the era of Miscavige, you have this weird thing of people just constantly redoing bridge steps. And she calls that out as obviously being incorrect. For about 10 years, Miscavige was running what he called a pilot program to deliver a newer and faster version of the lower levels of Scientology's bridge called the grades. And this newer and faster version was only being delivered at Flag here in Clearwater. And the longer, older version of the grades were still being delivered at every other Scientology org in the world. And Miscavige justified this by calling it a pilot program, but it went on for like 10 years. And it created this weird situation where Scientologists all around the world knew that they could come here to Flag and do those levels for faster and cheaper than their local Scientology organization. And so not only on a technical level, as far as how these levels are supposed to be delivered, not only on a technical level is that a huge violation, but it also created a weird like business competitive advantage where Scientologists were less likely to support their local organizations and more likely to want to come to Flag to get auditing that they really should have been getting at their local organization. So she calls that out as being an obvious violation. And the last thing that she refers to was Miscavige having completely and utterly dismantled and destroyed the entire management structure. We're talking about middle management, but even specifically the international management structure that L. Ron Hubbard had put in place before he died. Now, personally, I think the entire organizational structure of Scientology is unnecessarily redundant and onerous and ignorant in the way that it manages organizations, but that's not really the point here. The point is L. Ron Hubbard, as he was in 1980 when he went off into seclusion, he explained to the entire Scientology world that he was putting these giant, robust, expert management networks in place to basically replace him. He was putting these structures in place so that no one person was going to be replacing him. It was an entire structure that was replacing him. And this structure was composed of very well-known Scientology managers who in their own rights were quite famous in the world of Scientology. These people have one by one systematically been undermined and removed by David Miscavige to the point where international management actually no longer exists. To any staff members or Sea Org members in Scientology, this is very hard to believe. You would think that it would be evident to them, but things can be so sequestered or compartmentalized in the world of Scientology that you'd be surprised how long international management can cease to exist without anybody actually knowing it. Now that I think about it, that doesn't speak very highly for what international management ever actually did. But these managers who, like I said, world famous in their own rights, she mentions Heber Jensch, she mentions Guillaume Leserve, she mentions Mark Yeager, Ray Midoff, Norman Starkey. She points out that all these executives used to actually speak to the Scientology public 4, 5, 6 times a year at these giant international events that Scientology would put on, and they would either stream these events through satellite to all the orgs, or they would record these events and send them out to all the orgs on DVD. So all of these Scientology managers used to speak at all of these events constantly. Now they're all gone. The only one who speaks at events is David Miscavige. Sometimes he'll bring out some 20 or 30-year-old something that no one's ever heard of before and introduce them as some representative from management, and they'll read off the teleprompter and everybody will applause and business goes on as usual. But all of these famous Scientology managers, gone. And she explains that she learned when she went up to international management for that 2-year period to work under Miscavige, she learned that Miscavige had removed them all from their posts. And he had all sorts of stories about all the terrible things they had all done to try to undermine Miscavige and destroy Scientology. So basically, Miscavige took what L. Ron Hubbard created and destroyed it. And let me take the opportunity to comment just for those who aren't familiar with my channel. Everything I'm saying, I don't care about any of it. I don't give a damn about Miscavige or Hubbard or the continued success or prospects of the Church of Scientology. None of this matters to me at all. I'm explaining this from the context of Debbie Cook's email and the impact that this email had on the world of Scientology. I think it's questionable what impact such an email today would have in the world of Scientology. I'm not really sure that there's anybody left in Scientology who particularly cares about the differences between Hubbard-era Scientology and Miscavige-era Scientology. I think it's likely that enough time has gone on and enough of these sort of like instances of exoduses have occurred that anyone who cared about those things may have already left Scientology. But just in case I'm wrong, you know, I wanted to just get this information back out. Because I'll tell you, for me, my process leaving Scientology, the first thing was opening up my eyes about Miscavige. Then opening up my eyes about L. Ron Hubbard and Scientology itself. That didn't come until later. So to a Scientologist, the first step really is just kind of confronting for the first time that Miscavige really is doing things completely opposite to the way Hubbard said they should have been done. And to someone that's never been in Scientology, be like, who gives a shit? Like, that's not what we care about. But to a Scientologist, it really is what they care about. So again, whether this is valuable to cover or not, we won't really know, but I hope that it is. So I say hats off and well done to Debbie Cook for doing what she thought she could do when she thought she could do it to bring about at least some change in the abusive and destructive behavior that she saw. Whether or not you agree with the fact that she still believed in Scientology, you still got to respect the fact that she stood up to the most oppressive and abusive force that currently exists in Scientology. This is a guy who has systematically taken out everyone he has seen to be a threat, everyone who's had any degree of popularity in Scientology, anyone that the public looked up to, anyone he thought could possibly threaten his control. And even after she left the Sea organization, she bided her time, she waited for her shot, she took her shot, and she hit Miscavige square between the eyes. Did it take down Scientology? No. Did it lead to an awful lot of people leaving Scientology? Yes. Her testimony that exists online, it exists on YouTube, absolutely some of the most devastating testimony we've ever seen relating to Miscavige and the international base. So for all of that, to me, Debbie Cook is to be commended. All right, so that is all I have to say on this subject. Thank you once again to everybody who watched until the end of the video. I would be remiss if I did not mention my campaign for Clearwater City Council will begin next week. Once I file those papers, I will be letting everybody who's interested to know how they can help my campaign. I want to say thank you and welcome to all the new subscribers over the past few weeks. Hope you're loving this content. I hope you guys will stick with me on this wild ride that will be my city council campaign over the next 6 months, and I'll talk to you guys soon. Bye. I want to give a big thank you to the sponsor of today's video, Dream Realty. Oh wait! That's me! I've been a real estate investor for over 20 years. I bought my first investment property when I was 20 years old. For the last 15 years, I've been buying and selling my own properties all over Clearwater and Tampa Bay. If you're looking to buy a home or sell a home and you'd like to work with me, get in touch and I'll get it done for you. Thanks again to everyone who supports this channel, and thank you for watching.
Okay, if you want to see my rock and roll songs, click right on this guitar. And if you want to see a different one of my videos, then you could click right inside here. If you have subscribed or not, subscribe right here. Bye.